Welcome to Fashion Neurosis, Nick Cave.
I'm happy to be here, very happy to be here.
Can you tell me what you're wearing today and why you chose these clothes?
I chose the clothes because they're the clothes I always wear. The suit is by Bella Freud. And, well, as you know, you've been making my suits, my day suits and stage suits, actually, as it turns out, for, I don't know, years now, right? Do you know how long?
Must be about 8 years.
Yeah.
I think.
And very, I mean, it's all I wear, essentially. So I always wear a suit. When I wake up in the morning, I put a suit on. I don't like differences in things. So it's always the same cut of suit. It's the same one that we've been making now for years. And so I'm wearing that, one of those, one of the many I have now. And a shirt that's made by the same guy who makes all my shirts, who's made my shirts for years, AJ. And a tie, from a vintage tie.
Because you wear quite, you use the word conservative, that for a certain type of condensed look. But I've always noticed that your shoes are always the wild card. You never can, they always have this kind of cowboyish, this swagger, the thing I always associate with how you walk, like you've just swung open the door into a saloon.
Well, the problem is with shoes that no one makes good ones. In my view, it's an absolute disaster to try and find a decent pair of men's shoes. Women's shoes are an entirely different thing, and there's the most gorgeous shoes in the world out there. But men's shoes, the kind of shoes that I like, are very difficult to find, and I'm extremely particular about the shoes that I want. Thankfully, some years ago as well, Gucci made me a pair of shoes under my direction, and makes them for me and just sends the same pair to me whenever I need a new pair. Rather wonderfully, free of charge. So it's good for me. So the shoes actually never change. Nothing ever changes, essentially. I just have the same look day in, day out, which, suits me fine.
And what was the first garment that changed the way you felt about yourself when you noticed the connection between what you were wearing and what it gave you, how it made you feel?
Well, I was the third boy, so I tended to get hand-me-downs. We grew up in a country town. My parents didn't have a huge amount of money, and so I wore a lot of hand-me-down clothes from my brothers. But at some point, I think I was 11 or something like that. Well, a couple of things happened with clothes before that were sort of little mini disasters. But the first time I really coveted an article of clothing deeply was in the little country town that I lived in. There was one menswear shop, and in the window of the shop there was a pair of brown woolen herringbone style flares, and it was the first pair of flares in the country town that I grew up in, and no one wanted them. No one even knew what flares were, essentially. But I loved these trousers, and eventually I wore my mother down, and she bought these trousers for me, and I loved them like deeply, And the problem with them, though, was that they were incredibly itchy. They were unbelievably itchy woolen trousers and almost unwearable as a consequence. And so there's a sort of slightly tragic story attached to this, because I wore them to the school, a kind of a mixed school dance in the local school hall when I was about, I guess, 11 or 12. And because they were unbearable, the itchiness was so awful, I would wear my sister's tights underneath the trousers to stop the itching, and I wore them at this dance, and I told my best friend that I had a pair of my sister's tights on, and he then told told his best friend, and eventually this sort of went around the event, and a bunch of guys got me when I was in the bathroom, and attempted at least to take down my trousers and reveal the women's tights underneath, which I was wearing women's tights or girls' tights, and they didn't actually get them off, but they had a shot at it, and so I don't know what that did to me, but yeah, that was the sort of what happened. But I love those. I love those trousers, and that set off a kind of this feeling of seeing things and sort of coveting them, and them being slightly out of my. That I was unable to get them, and there were a lot of clothes that I would see, and my mother. It took a lot of persuading for my mother to buy these sorts of things for me. Yeah.
Because your mother, you told me your mother gave you one really good bit of advice, which was head high and fuck 'em all, which seems like
that's right.
It worked. Did she embody that as well?
She protected me. She was always on my side all through my school days and into my adult life, regardless of how glaringly obvious it was that I was at fault at any given time. I was in a fair amount of trouble as a teenager with the police and so forth, and she was always there for me and on my side, and she would mumble, "You bloody bastards," and stuff like that under her breath when she was sort of, getting me out of, when I'd been arrested for something or something. Like she was always there for me in that respect, and kind of right through to the end. She served as a sort of safety net. I think if you got that fundamental love as a child and support, you can do a lot and survive a lot as a consequence, even if it's just a sort of kind of subterranean feeling of security. I always had that with my mother.
Yeah, I had that with my father as well. Even though I didn't grow up with my father, I felt that he was an ally. And what you're describing, I agree, it makes you able to cope with these attacks that happen later in life, whatever they are.
Yes, and maybe similar to your father, it's not like my mother showed it particularly.
Yeah,
she wasn't. I mean, she was not. She was a warm individual, but she was very stoic. Didn't go in for a lot of. You got on with things in an Australian kind of way. They used to call Australian women the little Aussie battlers. They used to call them. She was a battler in a way. in the sense that she was quite awful things, tragic things happened to her, but she just carried on, and it's not that she required that from us essentially, but it was, there's something to be said for that sort of stoicism, I think.
Yeah. Was your father similar, or did he have a different style?
Yeah, my father was much more flamboyant.
Oh, really?
Extremely flamboyant character. A sort of archetypal 70s man. So he was involved in the arts, and he dressed not dissimilar in a way to the way that I dressed for a while as a young man, which was 70s shirts that were sort of unbuttoned. He was always wondering whether he should buy a medallion or not. He was this kind of character.
Yeah.
He was like a typical arty sort of an Australian, not quite, something a bit off about the whole thing. But a very intelligent, cultured sort of man who knew his stuff,
Because you wear suits all the time now, pretty much most of the time, but you used to have more of an undone look, more wild, and that was, did you look at him for any of those pointers, or?
Not really, but it did coincide, really, now I'm thinking about it. But the sort of idea that I have a kind of a retro look, like a 70s retro look, but I actually am from the 70s.
Yeah.
The look that I had was not initially when I grew up, when I could establish a kind of look, before I could afford, say, suits, was a kind of 70s shirt, big collars, open, a couple of buttons down, some sort of gold jewellery, tightish sort of flared trousers. That kind of look was actually the look of the time. It wasn't a retro look so much at the time. There was a slight sense of irony about it, I guess, that we understood, but we actually loved that look. I've always, a lot of us Australians from that time loved that look. And I've always stuck to it on some level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's so much glamour. There's so much to play with from the 70s. And I never think of you as retro, but there is an endless mine of stuff to have from the 70s. There were so many gorgeous things, and then things referenced from the 30s, that real elegance, but just messed up a bit in the 70s.
Yeah.
And the irony as well. Even when people were deadly serious, it was kind of a joke because it was so gorgeous. I love it.
Well, I just think, personally, I think trousers mostly should be flared for men. Maybe not for everybody. Maybe that's not actually right. I haven't a deep aversion to skinny, tight trousers at the bottom. I can't think of anything worse. And that particular British suit that's tight and skinny lapels and tight trousers. Do you know what I mean?
The ones that
kind of lad look.
That cling to the calf, that's my worst look
or
on
cling
earth.
all the way down.
Yeah.
Cling on the thighs, and I just find that absolutely grotesque. And it's sort of still hangs in there, that look, for some reason.
I know, it's a very I don't understand.
You'd think they'd learn. You'd think they'd see themselves in a photograph and and understand how diabolical that look actually is. But
it's so unflattering. That's my main. Also,
deeply
the sort of
unflattering.
proportion that's emphasised is always the wrong bit.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wanted to ask you as well about your feelings about your body, because you're very self-disciplined, which I can relate to a lot, and you're very, very you're very thin, and you look after yourself, you maintain yourself, you even go cold water swimming. And I wondered when that was that something that started as a very young person?
I'm naturally thin, and I'm tall, so I can carry fluctuations of weight relatively easily. I was a drug addict for 20 years, so that keeps the pounds off. Not that I'm recommending it. And after that, I just kind of basically look after my weight. I have a kind of a certain weight that I prefer, and eat accordingly in a way. I don't, eat a lot, and then I don't eat so much, and it's the French diet. Is that what they say?
Is it? What's that supposed to be?
I think that if you eat an enormous amount the night before, you don't eat so much the next day.
Yeah.
I think, but maybe you got that wrong. Anyway, I tend to do that. I don't go to the gym. I don't do any of that stuff. The only activity I do, which is relatively recently, I think I've been doing for about 2 years or so, is walk to a lake and swim in the lake.
I mean,
that's not like that's a sort of gentle. That's much more to do with the water being cold than actually doing sort of exercise as such.
There's an exhilarating feeling, isn't it?
It's catastrophic, to jump into. I mean, if you're a sort of person who can find mornings difficult, or have a slightly gloomy temperament that they don't like, swim in cold water. It's literally impossible to feel depressed if you jump into freezing water, because the attack on the nervous system is so extreme. It just blows all that sort of stuff away. All of the kind of interior, the awful interior conversations that you're having about yourself and about the world or whatever, are obliterated. It's absolutely amazing. There's a writer, Roger Deacon. I'm paraphrasing him slightly, but he said, you leap in with all your devils and come out a giggling idiot. So I've mixed two things up, I think, with that one, but it's essentially very, very true. It's extremely good for the soul.
Yeah, really. I do a cold shower every morning for that reason.
Me too.
After the hot, I think, am I really going to do it? And I do it because I know it gets rid of this sad feeling that I...
That's right. How long do you do?
Well, I do 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I'd like to do 3, but I'm doing 2.
You don't have the time.
And
got too much else to do.
Yeah. There's always something to strive for, so I'm striving for 3 minutes. But it's miraculous the way the lightness comes afterwards, and
I do the same thing.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful to know that too. That even though I can't remember before I do it in faith, and then it always works.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And you mentioned being a bad drug addict for a long time, and but you still managed to be productive and make records and deliver things. And I wondered, when you stopped taking drugs and drinking, what kind of new disciplines came to life?
First of all, I was a heroin addict, and that is a discipline in itself. It's I always look at it as the sort of conservative's drug, in the sense that it requires its discipline. Otherwise it's complete chaos. So you wake up in the morning and you have to score, and you need to score again, or take your drug in the evening as well. This sets up a kind of a sort of ritual and a sort of weird stabilizing process in your life. The problem is if you're disorganized, or you don't have money, let's say, which I'd been a heroin addict and had no money. This stops you. It stops you being able to do this, and which sends your life into absolute disorder and chaos. But provided you remain sort of organized in some way, you can lead a weirdly stable existence. But it's actually difficult to stay, to stay organized. But once I gave that up, I did have a lot of things already in place. I worked in an office, and I worked at a desk, and I wrote my songs in what I called the office. So I had these sorts of things that contained me in some way, set up, and that I'd always done, even in Berlin, which were days of unbelievable excess and chaos. I still worked every day.
What record were you making around that time in Berlin?
In Berlin, what records?
Yeah.
I think Tender Prey was one of them.
Yeah.
The Firstborn is Dead. So it was the sort of mid-'80s. Right up until the wall came down. I left pretty much exactly when the wall came down. Not because of that, but coincided with that.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it was like this for your father, and from what I read, it was like that, say, for Francis Bacon. The work was in its way ordered, in the sense that you woke up and you went to work. This was not an optional thing, and it wasn't predicated on inspiration or anything like that. You just did your job until a particular time, and then you went out and did whatever you did after that. I've always followed that idea, which actually I learned off the painters, because I went to art school for 2 years, and I had a lot of painters who were in the years above me, and I got on really well with these people, and they led pretty extreme, wild lives, but they always were at work in the morning, regardless of what state they were in. And this sort of, it's not even, people say it's discipline, but it becomes second nature after a while.
God, that's so interesting.
But that's how I've always acted as a musician, and that I've worked every day. But of course, musicians are very different creatures than painters, artists. They work when they feel like it. They do nothing for a week, and then eventually a song sort of floats down, and they write it down and strum their guitar every now and then. There's a kind of there's no real work ethic going on, especially in my day, with musicians. But I always had one.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what my father did. And it's so interesting that you learnt that at art school, and people associate artists with being very whimsical in their application, and they are the opposite, because otherwise nothing happens.
Nothing gets done.
Yeah, I learned my work ethic from sitting for my father and watching him, and him saying, he used to say, art comes before everything, and that was evident. You know, I didn't live with him or anything, but because he was an affectionate father in his kind of atmosphere, like your mother, he wasn't demonstrative, but I felt it.
Yeah.
It was such a lesson of, especially battling the sort of gloom. If I work, something will happen, and something has to happen. And I mean, you do so much anyway, as well as writing songs.
Well, I actually, in the end, don't think that what you've said. I don't think art becomes before everything. I used to feel that. I used to be sort of have these feelings when I would write and make my art of a kind of super capability about things, and it was no problem for me to go into the office and completely be absorbed in the process of songwriting and whatever I was doing, writing the books I've written or whatever those other things were. It was very easy for me to fall into that. And I always had this sort of underlying feeling of my own capabilities. I've sort of never doubted that, even when there was no real evidence of those capabilities. When I was young, I always had this sort of feeling that what I was doing was of great import, and so that was this was the sort of engine of creativity. But in the end, I think it took a devastation in my life with the death of my son to realize that this is not true. This is fundamentally the wrong way of looking at how you live a life. You may leave things behind you, but I think personally, it's a life ill-lived. To be completely consumed with your own internal abilities at the expense of everything else. And if I have regrets, is that I thought that too, that art was everything, and it's not. And I tend to feel other things are more important. My position as a citizen, as a parent, as a husband, as a friend. These things are really the sort of the true sort of juice of life. If you understand what I mean.
I totally.
And you can be a great artist, but you can also be a terrible human being as a consequence. And I don't think that ultimately I don't feel comfortable with that anymore. So it doesn't mean that I don't work anymore. It's just that I spend more time consciously, spend more conscious attention on these other things.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, I remember my father saying that when I was when I was 10 and things, and thinking, okay, I get, it's a difficult thing to hear from the person you love most in the world.
I would have thought that was a difficult thing to hear.
And I think I think I'm inventing this, but I think part of why he said those things was so that he could be as ruthless as he was. But he did care about people.
Yeah.
And I wonder if he was afraid of sometimes those feelings interfering with his rigorousness. But I agree with you that I think you can be dedicated, and you can expand your heart and your mind to be able to love people and let them in.
That's beautifully put. I think that's absolutely possible. That idea of sacrificing everything for your art, for me, sits with the idea that, say, drugs give you an edge or something like that. That these sorts of ideas are extraordinarily self-serving ideas that are actually just completely untrue, as far as I can see.
Yeah.
Because I've done both. I know the amount of times someone's told me, look, I need to take drugs to write, or I need to lead a dissolute life for to be able to write, or whatever these sorts of things are. That's just not true. And it's also not true that you need to sort of sacrifice your sort of relationship with the world in order to sort of to be like a great artist.
Yeah, it's a narrow.
Many did, obviously, but I don't think it's necessarily the way.
I'm glad. And you talk a lot.
Susie before I came. Sorry, Susie before I came said, "Make sure you're funny."
That's so funny. I was going to ask you about Susie because she's such a.
Well, she's the one who should be lying here. She's by far the interesting one. I hope you are. Are you trying to get that happening?
Yeah, I hope Susie will be here one day. But as you know, she's the most elusive character, and with all her demeanour of gentleness and demureness, she's the most strong-willed person I've ever met in my entire life. And you're such a, you seem such a dominant character, but no one can get one over Susie. And
no,
I wonder.
I'm not really at all.
In that
respect.
know. It's your style. Your style is a style of authority, but you're a very gentle person as well. And
it's because I wear a suit.
I wanted to ask you about the effect that Susie's had on you, because in 20,000 Days on Earth, the sort of film about you, documentary, you have this chunk where there are these iconic moments from life, including Marilyn Monroe and the death of Kennedy, and you say, then I met Susie. And I wondered, did you always think you would meet this love that was that big, or did it just happen when you met her?
Yeah, I don't think I always thought that, no. It's difficult to say in a way. I don't think I had any. At the time that I met Susie, I was struggling with all sorts of things, and I was in no way in kind of showroom condition, as you know. You have had such a extraordinary, a pivotal sort of position in our lives, because not only were you Susie's dear friend and someone that kind of looked out for Susie too, because she had her own problems back then. you were also the reason why we met. There was a show at the National History Museum, right? Correct me if I'm wrong here. And it's quite something because I didn't know you very well. It was the first show I'd ever been to fashion show I'd ever been to in my life. And we had, I was in the front row, and there were little name tags on each seat, and there was my name, and then I was sitting next to James Fox, who I thought was the actor James Fox, and I'm not sure who was on, and Susie was on next to James, who I hadn't met, and I'd sat down. I got there early, and I'd sat down, and I was waiting for things to happen. I was very much I was with my ex-partner who'd kind of come along for the ride, and I didn't really know what to expect in a fashion show or anything. I was a little bit at sea being there anyway. And I was just sitting there, and this woman walked in, Susie. And, you know, you hear about this sort of love at first sight type of thing. And what I tried to say in that little piece in 20,000 Days on Earth, of the effect that she had when I saw her, but it was an absolute impact. It was a complete impact in every possible way. And I just never seen anyone so beautiful. It's difficult to put it. It's difficult to put into words, but her sort of, as she walked past and sat down next to James, the effect was not unlike we're talking about jumping into freezing water. It was catastrophic, and it changed everything for me.
Wow.
It completely reassembled what it was, my notions about everything, including beauty. There is an extreme beauty to Susie that is extremely mysterious. It seems to change every day, that even still after, 25 years of marriage or whatever it is, I can't really put my finger on. And it was rather beautiful because James was sitting in between each other, but I kept kind of glancing across James at Susie, and she sort of was glancing across at me, and there was a sort of, there was just this feeling, and then I went backstage, and she was backstage, and I was literally too overwhelmed to be able to speak to her, but we did have a brief exchange there. And, I said hello and that it was lovely to meet you or something like that. And she said, it's lovely to meet you, like this, in this Susie way. And,
I know.
And I think that was all I could handle, and kind of, I'm not quite sure what happened after that. Then over quite a long period of time, we gradually got together. I actually had to work out what to do about pursuing someone that, I had these feelings for. I'd had no practice at that whatsoever. I'd never had to ask a woman out on a date or anything in my entire life. I'd just been in a band. So you just go from hello to, waking up with them the next morning. There's no, do you understand what I mean?
Yeah,
there's none of that kind of, anyway, I had to sort of work that out, and that eventually we slowly, got together. But I've forgotten what I was talking about. Sorry, it's this sort of, it's the psychiatric couch.
I think just the the impact of Susie on your... Well, I suppose I always had this idea I would meet someone and the world would change, and it would be the opposite of my parents, who were together briefly, but I would meet this life-changing person. And in a way, you did meet the life-changing person, but it sounds like you didn't have a plan as such, and Susie has just become... I mean, you have one of the great loves of this century, you know. It is just such a moving thing. And you wrote that piece in the Red Hand Files about when Arthur died and using your grief as a superpower. And I've read that lots of times. I've sent it to people whose children have died, and I always remember having breakfast with you about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was really down, and you said, I can experience happiness. And I always remember that moment, thinking about what you've been through, and it was really like a life raft to me, because it wasn't that I think, if you can go through this, why am I feeling this? It was just this feeling of possibility, and that you extended that to me, and I wondered how you'd created that.
Yeah, I mean, that's lovely for you to say that, and I think for me, and maybe it's always been this way to some degree, that, you know, for me personally, this may not apply to everyone, but for me personally, the sort of antidote to despair is order, and knowing what you're doing in your life, and knowing why you're here, and having practical things that structure a life, and I really have to do that, even though marriage is one of those things. It's a kind of ordering of love, in my view, in a very beautiful way. But Susie is chaotic. Susie is this element of disorder and chaos, and sort of unmanageability, that I have no control over, that exists within my life. And so, who as you were saying, just does what she wants to do, you know, is very free in that way.
Yeah.
But for me, I have to, as a response to that, I have quite an ordered way of living, you know, going through my day, for example. And I don't like disorder, because I get sad if things are chaotic and I don't know what to do next. You know, it's just bad. It's just bad for me. Not everyone's like that, and I'm not saying that you need to be like that, but for me personally, that idea, if we go back to fashion even, of wearing a suit, for me, is something structured, a kind of, you know, it's like a stabilizing element in my life, is to wake up in the morning and put on a suit with all its kind of structure and architecture and its angles and everything like that. You know, I don't like soft clothing. I don't like, I like to be kind of kept. I love the structure and strictures of things, mostly really because I think that's when I can allow the imagination to be run completely free, as long as there's some sort of order around things. And in a way, we go back to the idea of painting and stuff. I think that is a way of making order out of chaos.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's absolutely essential for me and for my happiness, and also I would say the sort of success of our relationship. One of the reasons for that is a marriage, and that we are contained in something that's sort of bigger than our own selves in some way.
Yeah.
You know, that we work not. I think we both understand that on some level. That, yeah. Sorry.
No,
is that okay?
It's wonderful. I mean, it's such a useful thing to know about yourself, because often people don't know what makes them happy or what is a structure to make things productive or for life to feel, going forward. And
that's right.
the more you know, I find, the more you know what suits you, the more you can do.
Yeah. I mean, I fundamentally disagree with the concept of that sort of untrammeled freedom that we're all sort of supposed to be making our way towards. The sort of destruction of the institutions and all the things that hold the society together, and these ideas of marriage and these sorts of things, and also creativity, that we're at our most creative when we're at our most free. I don't think that's true. I think we're, in my experience at least, at my most creative when I'm operating in a system of quite rigid, controlled experience. That's when the good stuff really happens for me.
Yeah.
And I find that too in the idea of marriage. For me personally, I'm not. I can only speak from myself in these matters, and there's people who have excellent lives in all sorts of different ways. But for me personally, that antidote to despair and has a lot to do with the habits and rituals that I have operating in my life.
Yeah. I like to have to do things.
Yeah.
Because then I can get them done, and even traveling,
But I always feel you're very ordered, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but only.
I mean, there's an attempt that you understand the sort of the despairing nature of chaos.
Yeah, totally.
Because of the way you were brought up, and is that right?
Yeah, very much so. I feel it's the antithesis of being
you
able.
had hippie parents, and
yeah,
you didn't have to go to school, and is that right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it was, and I found order made me able to have ideas, and the less order, the more of a mess. I just can't make decisions, and when I feel indecisive, I feel totally, without any power.
Yeah.
So I relate very much to this whole thing about work. I love going to work. I like being at my desk and having deadlines, and I love it. It's great. I mean, in fact, when Susie was doing The Vampire's Wife, her amazing fashion brand, and there was the trade fair in Paris called Premiere Vision, which is the most boring.
Oh, the memories.
And she would manage to get out of going, but she'd send you, and we used to go around this huge place which it's like there's no air, it's like breathing dust and thousands of stands, but you were really good at it. You're able to do things that a lot of men would find totally phasing. And have you felt so confident?
I was the only person at Premier Vision that actually liked being there, I think.
I think so.
Because I was there with, there was a bunch of other, I think Philip Tracy was there, or Stefan, or you, and I mean, I went to a few of them, and everyone loathed going to Premier Vision because it's just such a sort of shit show. But it was new for me, But yes, Susie, had a whatever at the last minute, and so
she'd get a headache, and then
she'd get a headache or whatever that might be.
That was great.
And but I love doing that.
Yeah, you seem to have you give a lot of thought to each other's work, and you're very collaborative without collaborating in an official way, but you listen to each other. That's the impression I get. Anyway.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Susie's actually very musical, much more innately musical than I am. I mean, she just didn't learn an instrument or anything, but she's hears music in a very musical way. And I'm quite good with clothes and stuff. At least I have my own ideas about it. I have, very violent reactions against things that I don't like. And in the same way as Susie does, there's no two ways about certain things in regard to fashion for us. So that's good. And we're pretty aligned on those sorts of things.
And if you fancy someone and don't like what they're wearing, does it kill your attraction? Susie is the great love in your life, and if she wears something, you're quite, as you've said, particular about things, and what happens?
Well, do you mean I'd be put off someone if they wore something that I had a particular dislike?
Yeah.
They'd have to work a lot harder, if you know what I mean. I don't know. I have there's certain things I don't like. Do you want me to say what they are?
Yeah, because I know there are certain shoes and things you don't like.
I have sort of issues around certain shoes.
What kind of shoes?
I don't like ankle boots. I really don't like them.
Any particular reason?
And I know many people to wear them, and with dresses.
Right.
I think they're a bit of a disaster.
Can you describe what it is you don't like?
I think it's a shortening. They basically, in my view, shorten the legs. Don't you think? Do you think?
It depends on.
Do you have a whole lot of them in your bedroom?
I've only got a pair of white cowboy
Am I
boots.
sort of wading into?
No, it's a popular look amongst sexy girls who wear ankle boots, but
yeah, I don't like that. Mm-hmm. I just don't like that. Yeah, I know the look. It's just me. It's nothing actually wrong with them. It's just a sort of thing. For example, do I sound like some sort of fascist?
No, it's amazing how affecting it is when someone wears something that you don't like, and how you have to reconfigure your intention towards them. Is it over, or do you kind of find something else or demand they take it off if you are in that privileged position?
Yeah, or understand in some way that friendship or whatever is really a kind of series of sort of small forgivenesses, and it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Ankle boots aren't the end of the world. They're adjacent to the end of the world, but kind of forgivable too, right?
So I remember when I came to Brussels for your exhibition of the ceramics at Xavier Huskins, and I came and Susie and I had lunch, and then she said that you didn't like the shoes she was wearing, and so you went to a shop and she put these shoes on, and then they cost about £2,000, and she was really pleased she'd managed to get these wonderful new shoes because you'd objected to whatever it was she was wearing. So it had quite a good outcome.
Oh, is that why she wears those shoes?
Apart from to your credit card, but
yeah, she's got a lot.
As well as touring your new album, you've been exhibiting your work, your sculptures of the series The Life of the Devil, and there's something very endearing about him and the clothes he wears as well. I wondered how you decided what he would look like, because I mean, I love your drawings anyway, and these sculptures and these figurines are just so beautiful and full of pathos.
Oh, thanks, Bill.
And the devil's wearing these sort of amazing clothes as well, and I wondered how you chose to make him have this kind of touching element as well as being
I mean,
devil.
they're based on Staffordshire style or Staffordshire figurines. You know, they're imitations on some level of Staffordshire figurines, which were made in the, 1800s and later, but essentially then Victorian things. And so sometimes the costumes are Victorian. There's a narrative of 17 figurines that tell the story of the devil, and I think it's the 14th one where he is in despair, in remorse, the devil in remorse. He suddenly just wears a black suit, and I think that's an attempt to suddenly pull it into the contemporary.
It's very effective.
Yeah, thank you.
And as well as everything you do, I remembered a while back when Russell Crowe asked you to write Gladiator 2, and you did, and it sounded quite funny, and I wondered what happened to that.
What happened with that, the whole thing? I'd written the script for a film called The Proposition. It was an Australian Western.
It's a brilliant film.
That John Hillcoat directed. One day I get a phone call, and it's Russell Crowe. And this is just when the whole of the Proposition project had collapsed, and before it got working again and became a film. And he asked me if I wanted to write another script, and I'm like, no fucking way! I don't want to have anything to do with that. That's just sort of dog's job, it's just a complete waste of time, etc. And he goes, what about Gladiator 2?
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, didn't you die in Gladiator 1? And he goes, no, you sort that out. And because he wanted to be in it. And as far as I know, Ridley Scott was interested in the idea too. And so I set about writing that script. I just knew that the idea that I had would never be made in Hollywood anyway. So it was a kind of rather fun fool's errand that never got made. It was a good story.
I bet.
It was called Christ Killer, which was going to have problems in Hollywood anyway. But, Gladiator is sent down from purgatory in order to kill the Christians because they were sort of taking over, and the ancient gods were dying, and in one of the versions he ends up being the centurion that sticks the spear in the side of Christ.
Wow.
It went all over the place. Yeah. Anyway, I sent it to Russell, and I'm like, what do you think? And he goes, don't like it, mate.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, what about the end? Nah, mate. And so that was the end of that. And it's just sort of sat around, on the internet. You can read it, I think.
Oh, really? Oh, I'll definitely read that. I love films that bring in the gods, anything to do with ancient.
Yes, he wakes up in purgatory, and the gods know he is Gladiator, and so they send for him, and all the gods are dying because there's this force down on earth that's taking over, which is Christianity, and Christ and these disciples, and they know their days are numbered, so they send Gladiator down to earth to kill Christ and all the disciples.
Oh dear.
Anyway,
That's really funny.
it was a good idea, but
Yeah.
it didn't wash.
I remember once when we were figuring out some suits for you ages ago, and you said, I just want to look like a big old spider on stage, which is such a kind of powerful image. And my shrink said that people attach their phobias to especially spiders, but you describing yourself like this, and yet everyone is drawn towards you. And I just wondered what you were thinking when you said that.
Well, I think what I was probably thinking is I wanted to be long and lean in all angles and like a big old spider.
Yeah. It's a great description.
I think what I've always tried to do and what we've talked about before actually is the idea of the silhouette, and for me on stage that's what it's all about. It's why I tend to wear dark suits or black suits, and because they're good from a distance in the sense that your figure is cut out, the silhouette is clean and angular and cut out in a dramatic way. And
you write a lot about black hair, and you and Susie have this incredible black hair, and I wondered if you'd ever been attracted.
It comes from the same tube.
Have you ever been attracted to blonde?
Yeah, I've had blonde girlfriends. Feels weird to say, actually.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine it now, but I have, yeah. The thing about black hair for me, it has its origin story, which is that the first girl that I was really attracted to, or that I was like mystified by, I don't mean in love with, but that was, I thought was of a kind of beauty that I was very young, I was 14, 15 or something like that. I had absolutely no idea what to do with this, this person, but she had black hair and a kind of, she would wear pale makeup, and this is a long time ago, and that I was, deeply attracted to this person. I mean, deeply attracted. And she left suddenly. She just sort of disappeared out of my life. And after that, I started to dye my hair black.
Really?
I was, really upset by the whole thing. It was like the first sort of heartbreak. And I dyed my hair black, and I basically kept it black ever since, weirdly enough, for all sorts of different reasons.
There's something about when you and Susie come into a room and you have this glossy raven black hair, and it's so romantic. It's incredible.
Well, it's because we've sort of probably dyed it on the same day, out of the same,
Do you do it yourself? You don't
Yeah.
go somewhere?
I've been dyeing my hair, allegedly dyeing my hair for I don't know, 50 years. My God.
You told me once about the Enneagram personality typing system based on ancient spiritual traditions, which describes people's motivations in terms of their desires and fears. And I did the test. You said you were an 8, and I did the test and came out an 8. I was kind of very relieved to be an 8 too. And I just, do you enjoy that kind of thing sometimes?
Yeah, not really, and not really. It's it's a little kind of woo-woo, that kind of stuff. But I think the Enneagrams are actually very accurate. I found them at the time. It's one of those things. I probably raved you about it at the time, but I when I got my character type back, I recognized a lot, very detailed things that I saw in myself. And the one that moved me was Susie's Enneagram when she did it. She was a 6, and that was someone that was essentially fearful. You can grow into your Enneagram type, I think, and Susie's has throughout her life an extraordinary amount of horrendous things, the sort of reason for Susie is predicated on a whole lot of dark subterranean forces in her life that she is afraid of, and fear. And when I read her thing, I found it unbelievably moving, because she's just a 6. These things, these confounding, deeply difficult aspects of her nature are there because she is a 6, and that was really moving to me. A 6 literally dresses beautifully all the time because they're afraid of being physically attacked.
Wow.
And so they feel that they need to maintain, be visually beautiful to the world, or else the world will turn on them. I mean, it's an unbelievably moving thing, and on some level, it makes sense with Susie. She, I found that really, the thing about the Enneagram is that they really humanize people. You read an Enneagram and you understand why someone is the way that they are, and I find the Enneagram in the end very moving sort of thing.
Whenever I've doubted Susie, she's proved me wrong in the way that I would least like it. Like,
what do you mean?
Well, I remember once we went on holiday in Italy, and we went to this beach, and she said, I'm worried that there's snakes. And I said, oh, don't be silly, it's fine. And, I've been there loads of times. And
yeah.
Anyway, and I looked round, and there was something that looked like the Loch Ness Monster just coming up and down out of the sand. And it was like she just proved to me.
Yeah, that
I'll never forget that.
That happens all the time with me. That is a 6 thing, without going back to the Enneagrams too much, but that a 6 can see danger and disaster coming way before normal human beings can, and have an intuitive response to people. That's often, Susie is like, be careful of that person.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? We just met them, and she's generally right.
Yeah, I always pay attention.
Yeah,
I don't.
I've learned to pay attention.
Yeah, because I want to reassure her, but I also want to pay attention because she's onto something quite a lot of the time.
She's generally onto something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's I don't personally. I'm trusting of the world, trusting of people. I kind of like people even if I don't like them.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I just like them in theory. And
I think I'm more afraid of fear than I'm fearful. Fear is such a potential stopper that I've often throughout my life set myself tests, not even consciously some of the time, but it makes me feel very
what?
Well, like when I was a child, I used to when I learned about the Spartans, I did all sorts of endurance tests.
Really?
Yeah, like when I was 11 and 10, I constructed. I would sleep with one blanket in the winter and not allow myself a second helping.
That's brilliant, really.
I mean, that's why all the cold water and all that stuff, I'll embrace that. That seems easy. But having a genuine fear feels so much more threatening and more paralyzing that I like all the continuity and anything that sets that up, like you described.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not fearful. You know, I'm not saying I'm brave. I'm saying I just don't have that sort of paralyzing fear or a kind of suspicion towards certain things that Susie has, and she has very good reason for it. You know, if you start to dig back, through her life, the things that she's gone through, it's no wonder. And I haven't had that kind of life. I haven't had those sorts of experiences. You know, so people have generally been good.
Yeah.
To me, and that I've seen in the way that they are. So I have a sort of fundamentally different way of viewing the world. But the world is often difficult, and Susie's often right, you know. And I'm often left looking kind of naive about things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, she has this kind of like she understands the geology of what's happening. It's so deep.
Yeah.
It's really unlike anyone. I don't know anyone like her. And she's,
yeah, it's funny that you mention the snake. You know, when she said you've got to be careful of snakes. This sort of thing has played out with me so many times, and you know, I'm Australian, so I'm like blasé about all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The dangers lurking behind everything. And we've had absolutely hilarious and tragic scenarios in that way.
I think I remember hearing something about finding a scorpion under a rock, or
she kept worrying about spiders in Australia, and I'm like, for fuck's sake, you know. Yeah, there are spiders, but they're not. You know, you're not going to find them anywhere. And we were in a rented house, and she was putting the nappy onto one of the children, and there was a whiteback, which is a particular spider that if it bites you, you sort of blister up in all these pustules and stuff. I mean, it's unbelievably horrible spider sitting in the child's nappy, and she's like, it's typical. Anyway.
Yeah, she'd find it and she'd save the day. It's a deadly combination.
Yeah, that's right.
I've been listening a lot to your song Love Letter, and I love that song so much. And there's a line where you say, I said something I did not mean to say. And I wondered if you remembered what that was.
I don't know, but that is from that period in our early relationship. Susie claims, although I can't remember doing this, but there's probably very good reason I can't remember doing this, that I put a love letter into her letterbox at Castellane when she lived there in Maida Vale. That I think it was after that we'd broken up. We'd broken up. We were together, and then she stopped seeing me. I think I was just too fucked up to have a relationship with. And couldn't find her. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And you held this party here or the other next door.
In my old flat, yeah.
In your old flat. And I was kind of bereft by this stage. Susie had completely disappeared off the face of the earth. I might have the order of things wrong, but Susie turned up to that party wearing a little dress that she cut off
Yeah.
that was so fucking short, and long purple gloves up to here, and this flimsy tiny little skirt, and looked unbelievable. I mean, she looked unbelievable. I can't, you know, it was deeply unfair that she sort of re-entered my life. And I'm not sure if she didn't disappear again. I can't really remember. But anyway, that night, apparently, I sort of ran through the rain and sort of delivered a letter into her letterbox, which that song "Love Letter" comes from.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that's true.
I seem to remember things.
But I was pretty, I was pretty out of it, so I probably don't know. I can't really remember that well.
You courted her in the way, and I always remember her telling me that she just decided that you were the one, and she came to your door and rang the bell and said, "I don't care what you're going through, but I'm never leaving you again."
Yeah, that's right.
It was incredible.
That was after 8 months of disappearing, essentially.
Yeah.
She just arrived back. There's a song about that. There's a song, "Final Rescue Attempt," it's called.
Yeah,
off the
listening.
new album, which describes that.
It's
that
so
moment.
beautiful. I love that.
The last time you came around here was to rescue me. You arrived with your customary flair. You rode through the rain all the way from Castellane, with the wind in your hair. Yeah, that was quite. That was quite something. That, and then she just stayed. She just stayed. So once again, you're sort of involved in our lives.
Wow, it's been a great joy for me to have you and Susie as my family and our sons.
It's a family thing.
It is. It feels very close and very, talking of freedom, it does feel, it has this freedom of how we come and go, but we're always there. It's one of the great joys of my life.
Yeah, me too. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to come and do this in a way, apart from that I've seen other ones that you've done and they're really amazing. It's a sort of lovely idea. We've had countless meals together and conversations about things, but there's something about this idea that I saw on some of the other people, this kind of drifty thing that goes on, just to lie here and talk about things. It's a unique way to conduct an interview in a way.
Thank you so much.
Good idea.
Thank you so much, Nick, for being here and being on Fashion Neurosis and for being.
It's my pleasure, Bella.